and a born and bred Orange Hill man. I was born right beside what was the Seventh-day Church. I've lived practically in Orange Hill all the days of my life, and it's a part of me. I've been born there, actually not hospital born, but born in Orange Hill. My family is deeply rooted in the Orange Hill area.
With a background like that, Canon Peter is well placed to take us on a guided tour of the area and its surrounding communities. Hello and welcome. It is your weekly program that has always been concerned with the virtual gathering. That is the gathering that occurs on air and online. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time. This week, the spotlight falls on Orange Hill and its neighbouring communities. Take it over, Canon Peter.
Orange Hill is one of the old communities of Barbados and has a number of very rich traditions and a very rich and varied history. It is located in St. James, the central area, one of the most beautiful views in Barbados. When you think about the central area, I'm thinking if you look at the geography of Barbados, you're looking at the area east of Highway 2A. And if you take a drive along Highway 2A, you look up and you'll see a number of communities. But more so, you'll be seeing a cliff, which runs straight across from probably St. Thomas, right into St. Lucie, that cliff. And looking up to Orange Hill, you'll see from there just a few houses. But when you journey into Orange Hill, you'll recognize the magnitude and the size of the area. Now, this Orange Hill community is perhaps one of the also highest elevated communities in Barbados. There are very few communities on this hill or this escarpment when you look at geography in Barbados. It is probably the Rock Hall community, the Shop Hill community, going across to Black Bess, and then into St. Peter, St. Lucie, the Oxford, Mount Gay communities of St. Lucie. These are the communities that occupy this upper area and depend on commuting via Highway 2A into Bridgetown. Orange Hill is surrounded to a large extent by gullies, and there are a number of gullies running across the landscape east to west in Barbados. And there's one huge gully, Lancaster Gully, where the truck from St. Philip went over in the 1940s, creating one of the biggest accidents. But that gully is to the south of Orange Hill, and to the north there's another gully which borders Orange Hill. So it stands on an escarpment, a lovely escarpment, high area, and over the years Orange Hill has taken a different development, because I can see Orange Hill as a village in itself, yeah, but there are other satellite villages around Orange Hill which make up the Orange Hill community. Like you can think about Wapping, you can think about Endeavour, you can think about Gaskin, as we might call it, and Jackman Alley. Speaking to the older folk in Orange Hill over the years, they will have made a connection which is an interesting one, as they connected the right excellent Samuel Jackman Prescott with Orange Hill community. And by that I mean the Jackman Alley, part of the Wapping community which we have heard about recently, that Samuel Jackman Prescott had some origins in this area. Also, Gilts Village, as other areas which expand the Orange Hill community. In recent years, however, you've had development where people in Orange Hill have been able to purchase land and build homes just outside of Orange Hill or very close to Orange Hill. And think about that, you're thinking about the Orange Hill and Apes Hill communities, and you're thinking about the Buccaneer community. And by extension, if you go to the north of Orange Hill, you will come to the St. Silas area, the Waterhall area, and now what's being developed by government as the Dean's area. All of this encompasses the Orange Hill area.
Commentators often say that if communities are to survive, they must expand. And if you were to traverse the island, you would come across a number of communities that are no longer as vibrant as they were before. In fact, Dr. Lionel Smith, in his book, Death of a Village, The Story of St. Simon's, wrote about that. Fortunately, that cannot be said about the community of Orange Hill. Orange Hill continues to expand.
It is for us a village which has taken a deep significance in this development of this country, because when you look back at the history of Barbados, you'll find that people might come from Boscobel, or they might come from areas in St. Lucie or Turners Hall, but families have moved to town. This is because people have moved to Bridgetown in order to find jobs, especially the development of places like the port and shipping in Barbados. A number of people moved to the Bay Land, a number of people moved to Goodland. So we've got relatives who moved away. And then in the early days before the development of the St. Silas area, persons who grew up in Orange Hill and they moved into some of the newer developments around St. Thomas and around Barbados on a whole. So Orange Hill and Orange Hill's people have moved off and they've populated and moved into other areas. And there are lots of families in Barbados who will be able to trace their history back to Orange Hill. And many people, the older people, will tell you about these families as they took root in Orange Hill. And some of them come back to look for relatives and friends, or you might meet them at funerals. I remember being at a funeral in Bridgetown one day, lifting this old guy who was a plumber. He was my mother's first cousin. And as I lifted this body behind the All Souls Church, a young lady whom I taught at the convent years before looked at me and said, "Reverend Haynes, what are you doing lifting my grandfather?" And I said to her, "He's my cousin." And it's only then we realized that we were very closely related. So Orange Hill is an important area.
An important area, and its tentacles are now throughout many communities in Barbados. Speaking about genealogy, let us continue the look at family names and some of those who were very popular here in Orange Hill.
There have been a number of families which are important and have contributed to the growth and development of Orange Hill over the years. And you can think about the Williams family with Theo Williams and Lyndale Williams, and the CQ Williams. You think about the Marshall family, which is an important family in Orange Hill. You think about Skeet as an important name. And Payne speaks for itself. The present representative for St. Andrew, Mr. George Payne, as part of the Payne family. Mr. Leonard Payne, who worked for C.O. Williams Industries for a long period of time in an important position there. And we've got the Paynes, you've got the Walcotts, which is my own family, developing into the Haynes later on. And you go through the Hunts in Orange Hill, the Moores in Orange Hill, and you pick up a number of families which have been there over the years. And these families which have made a significant contribution to the development of our nation. When we think about the families, we think about the things which the families were engaged in. The bakery, Tommy's Bakery in the Baywoods, which provided bread for lots of people in the north. And there's a story about one of the members of the family who took the school bread and he sold his bread to his counterparts at the Cordon Parry School. So that was a signal trait of Orange Hill, and it survived to a few years ago. You think about, and people have been talking about the shops, we've got a number of shops in Orange Hill. You've got the corner shop, and then Gamby's shop, and Dye's shop, Mr. Thornton's shop. You had, in the olden days, Miss Ford, Aggie Ford's shop. And when you think of Aggie Ford, immediately you begin to think about the Ford family. And Aggie was the aunt to Lindsay Bolden. So the Boldens also have that place in Orange Hill. All right? And the other shops, the Phillips shop, Buddy Phillips, down by the old playing field. And you could watch cricket on Saturdays or Sundays if you were allowed to get out there on Sundays. You could watch cricket from that shop and enjoy the beverage of what we call a cider. I don't know what it was made of. It was red, it was sweet, it was refreshing, and with a tennis bread or with a turnover, it was a lovely meal for a youngster or any person on Saturday evening. So we had those shops which were there, and there are other shops which were there. I must also talk about sport, and the playing field, which was a peculiar playing field. It sloped, had this ugly slope on the eastern side. So to get a 4, you had to really hit the ball up this hill. And we produced people like, again, George Payne, and we had 2 cricket teams, I remember. We had the Standard, which is one which dates right back into the history of Barbados, one of the early BCL teams. And then out of it, there was a family which developed the Sydney cricket team, which is named after a member of a particular family. So we had cricket, and we had cricketers like Graydon Nestfield as one of our cricketers who went on to play for Maple. And some of the other cricketers who developed out of Orange Hill, those who were involved in football and games. And we can see how things have changed, where now there's this expansive and beautiful playing field, flat, ready to be used, and community setting. But one thing about Orange Hill is also its plantations. Apes Hill, which gave the land for the schools, which also gave the land for the church. The Apes Hill family, the Walcotts, this is now the White Walcotts at Apes Hill, who gave the land for a community centre in Orange Hill. Perhaps one of the earliest community centres will have been what we know as the Buccaneer. The Buccaneer is named after the racehorse, which I was told the Walcotts own, won a few races. But they built this community centre for the use of the people of Orange Hill. It became a community centre. It began to be a place where service of songs and concerts and dances were held in the early days. It went on in the 1970s when we imported labour from St. Vincent and St. Lucia to work in agriculture. It went on to be a place where these people were housed. And then we've seen it come back into its own as a community centre. This was a gift to the Orange Hill community by the White Walcotts at Apes Hill. One of the core things about the Orange Hill community will be through the Buccaneer there was a lodge, and we call it a lodge, but it is a friendly society. And this friendly society which operated out of the Buccaneer. And there was another one which we call the Lily Lodge, and I'm told by the older people there were 2 others in Orange Hill, 2 other lodges, but there were places where people, the workers, were able to put down and save money. I'm told it was like 25 cents or 50 cents a week, sometimes 12.5 cents a week. And at Christmas they paid a bonus. And you'll see people going up to get the bonus, get their money, line up to get their bonus from this 25 cent or 50 cent that they played into the lodges. And that was an important part of the development of Orange Hill and the people of Orange Hill. It provided income, or provided a source of help for the people of Orange Hill. And I think also I've heard that people depended on that money to help pay for funerals. When people died, they were able to draw money from the lodges or from the friendly societies. And the friendly societies will have meant the beginning of what we would know as the co-ops and the credit unions in Barbados. And we see a village in which 4 of these groups, 4 of these friendly societies existed alongside each other, helping to support the initiatives of the people of Orange Hill. Strongly agricultural people who would grow crops. Many of them were peasant farmers growing sugarcane, supplemented their income, but some moved into other crops, the cultivation of other crops. And they were able to supply the needs of a growing hotel industry, with the hotels expanding to the West Coast, or selling to the supermarket like Supercenter again. People continue to be industrious, and we see not only industry in that form, but we see things like the mechanics in Orange Hill. One of the top mechanics in Barbados, or top electrical mechanics in Orange Hill, is Samuel Phillips, who is located in Orange Hill. He's always worked there for all his life. He works for so many people, and so many people have connected to Orange Hill via Sammy. You know, this is what Orange Hill is all about. And there are other younger mechanics who work in the area. There's some who've been trained by Sammy, but we're able to make our own in this world, in this community of ours.
The community-spirited nature of our people, that is very important for the survival of any community. Now, what about other occupations?
A number of people will be occupied as plantation laborers and workers, neighboring plantations, in particular people who journey down to Lancaster, people who worked at Apesill and Waterhall, and people who crossed the gully and went to Farmers or Plumtree plantation to find work. But that's in the beginning. But people have moved out of Orange Hill and traveled into other jobs in Orange Hill. Many of our people have gone into the civil service. Many have gone into the private sector. And I remember as a child, a number of them in the 1960s and into the 1970s more so, who were employed in the tourist industry. The tourist industry would have impacted heavily on Orange Hill, where closeness to the West Coast and to Old Town, and being able to make the way via Trent's Road, which is Highway C, I think it is, to make the way into Old Town, depending on, not a bus route, but people walked in those days. And people were given lifts. You looked after people, you saw them coming up the hill or going down the hill, and you were driving, you were encouraged to give them a lift and take them on their journey down the hill. There was no bus route connecting the areas. So a lot of these people went out to work in the tourist industry. Some also went to work as taxi drivers. I remember in the 1970s, early morning, these guys would get up, these older gentlemen, and they would clean off their cars, and you'll see the cars going down as they went out in their hats, and they went down to transport the tourists. That was their job. And other persons who worked as butlers, worked as cooks and maids in the tourist industry. And then later on, the development of Old Town, which brought Supercentre and that complex into being. And persons, young fellows who went to work and started off as carry-out boys. They were moving the goods and the purchase of people out of the supermarket. And many of them have been able to rise to prominence in that chain of companies. So we have varied occupations in Orange Hill now. And we see the development or the continual development of the area. And of great note and great significance would be the industrial nature of the people in Orange Hill. One significant one is my neighbour, who is Mr. Payne, Mr. Arthur Payne. Arthur Payne was a great lathman. He had worked in Curacao in the earlier days and had come back to Barbados. And he worked for the Barbados Foundry. Mr. Payne could build anything on a lathe. And he was instrumental in making knives. But the two of his greatest feats will have been, one, the construction of a cane mill. Simple construction of wheels turned by hand. And you could push the cane into these three big molders and it would grind the cane and grind the juice out of the cane. There was an area beneath that which caught the juice and it was siphoned off into a container at the bottom. So you were able to get, during the crop, people in the district, persons came to the Payne's home and they would grind their canes and go away with juice from the cane. Many of us who were neighbours would have benefited because when you came, you didn't have to pay. It was a free exercise. But you probably left a cane or two with the Paynes, and we neighbours and friends will have used those to get our own juice for consumption. So that's one of the lovely things about growing up in Orange Hill in the 1970s and late 60s. Also, Mr. Payne did something very special. Mr. Payne made a block machine, unique. This machine built many houses. We use it to build our home or part of our home, the Payne's home, and many other people use this machine. It is a simple device which built one block at a time. So my older brothers who will set out who were in charge of the building of the blocks will have in evenings mixed up the mortar, put them into the blocks or put them into the machine, and later on as they matured, you were able to open the machine and take the block out on a piece of board and put it out to dry. So we were able to build homes and build and develop around us using the technology which Mr. Payne himself had developed. And his mind to do anything on a lathe. And we are happy, we benefited from this individual and many others like him who would have made this valuable contribution to the village setting and to our young people as a whole.
A man who, because of his outstanding contribution, ought to be held aloft for all to see. Now, we could not visit the area without taking note of the church's outstanding contribution.
Orange Hill was and still is a community of people, a community, a fellowship of people. And in there we must think about the importance of the churches. The number of churches, sometimes you think about these churches and we recognize the importance which they played and the role they played in the development of the youngsters in the community. You had coming up from Orange Hill, you had the Brethren, you had the Pentecost coming up in Orange Hill, you had the Church of God, which later moved from the corner of the road and moved into Endeavour number 1, I think. And you've got the Christian Mission. And in there also, the Anglican Church, which had a Church Army Hall, a unique thing, which had this Church Army Hall, which was placed on lands owned by a particular family. And the church is still there. It's not a derelict, but it was a place for Sunday school, it was a place for meeting, and it served an important role. You can see how these churches have developed over the years. And you'll see what started as a little mission, a little building beside the road like the Pentecost or the Church of God, now having these expansive buildings where they're able to cater in the Church of God. They have their nursery. And you've got these elaborate buildings which have been built in Orange Hill. One of my colleagues questioned, how all these things happen in Orange Hill. These churches, which have become really significant in the community, and they stand out as beacons. There's this hall in Orange Hill which started out as a Close Brethren hall. And when the Close Brethren moved out, the Adventists moved into the hall. The church is still standing, is now not used, but the Adventists were there for years, and then they bought their own land in the area which was owned by the Burroughs family, and they developed their own a new complex, as it were, in Orange Hill. So we've had these churches playing significant roles in Orange Hill. So you've got in Orange Hill the development of churches from very small buildings, the village halls then, and they've moved into modern, elaborate churches, fully equipped with sound and equipment to conduct services. And I'm forced to recognize the work of Sister Jills, who was a pioneer and an evangelist in Orange Hill, who led the Pentecostal community in Orange Hill. And she was one of the founders of this church, and I think she went on to pastor churches also in Bridgetown, which were offshoots of the Orange Hill Pentecostal Church. And then she was able to carry that church community into the North American experience and probably into Boston, the Boston area, where I'm told she had churches also. So we've had a significant impact in religion and churches, and to underscore the work of some person like a carpenter in the area, Mr. Ephraim Walcott. And Framey, as we will call him, was a pastor. He pastored the Christian Mission. And his son now, Frank Walcott, the Reverend Frank Walcott, who pastors the community in Speightstown. So we have had and benefited from a rich religious tradition. And there are other churches across Orange Hill, like Graham, his hall in the Bearwoods, also stands out as one of the hallmarks of religion in the area. But I've left the St. Silas Church, which was a part of our growing up, and many of us who commuted to St. Silas to worship on Sunday mornings. And this gave us the schools, which will have been traditionally the St. Silas Boys, St. Silas Girls School, which have become the St. Silas Mixed School, and now we are pleased to host the Learning Center, which has found a home in Orange Hill. So it continues to be an educational community, and those who were involved in education, we hear about people talking about Chappie Creek and some of the other principals of the school in Orange Hill. For me, my experience was as a youngster coming up on the Alma Parish, H.A. Parish, the stalwart out of St. Peter. And Miss Parish was my Cub Scout leader, my principal at the St. Silas Junior School. And there's something very special about this also, because when we think of Orange Hill, we think about not just this little community, but because of church and school, we also embrace the people who came from Greenwich, who came to Orange Hill. And amongst those, and will be people like, I think, Ralph Boyce, but I'm sure Sion Goodrich, the late Sion Goodrich, who became Bishop of the Bermuda Islands. And my principal at Cardinal College, he was educated at St. Silas. And then you had, because of the system, the St. Boniface School, which was a junior school in Sion Hill. When they came to common entrance time, they moved into the St. Silas area too. They came to St. Silas School. So it was a training point for persons in this particular area. So we've made a significant contribution to education. Perhaps one of the most cherished and distinguished persons in education in Barbados from Orange Hill will have been Lewiston Wellington, the Duke, who was a teacher at Harrison College. And the Duke was from one of the Orange Hill families. He's a Wellington. He lived probably 2 houses above where I was born. So he went on to be the last principal of the Christchurch Boys Foundation School. And in 1978, he opened the Christchurch Foundation School as its first principal. And that is one of our treasured memories of Orange Hill. And persons like Guinea Yearwood, who was mentioned by Ocky Donovan at the funeral of the late Sir Everton Weeks. Guinea was an Orange Hill man. He played cricket in Orange Hill, and he went away. I think he went to the Bahamas for years, and then he came back, and he connected again, and he went on to teach at the Foundation School also. So we have some very treasured memories of scholarship in Orange Hill. And Guinea's father, Mr. Lemmy Yearwood, who taught persons like me at the St. Silas School in the early days, a strict disciplinarian, a no-nonsense man. My father, who also taught in the Orange Hill community.
As community members, we must see it as our responsibility to celebrate our people, especially when they are bringing along with them other community members on that path to progress. Canon Peter sums up his beloved Orange Hill.
It was, for us, we weren't rich in money, but it was a rich upbringing where people were part of a community. We were all connected, we all belonged to one another, we all looked out for one another, and there was respect between children and parents because we shared a common origin where people of, and had goals to achieve in this world and to move on in this world. So Orange Hill is this really beautiful community of people who continue to work together, people who continue to promote some good values.
Thank you very much, Canon Peter. And that is exactly what this program is all about. A recommitment to the Barbadian values and norms that made us better people. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.